These days, Western countries are withdrawing from Afghanistan, leaving a conflict-ridden society in a chaotic transition. In a dialogue with the Taliban that have taken place in Doha over the past year, the situation of minorities have been a central and very challenging topic. Western governments have also expressed concern about the situation of minorities in the Taliban's new Afghanistan after the withdrawal. Today, we've been so fortunate to have with us the researchers Arne Strand from Michelsen Institute and Cecilie Hellestveit from the Norwegian Academy of International Law here in Oslo with us for the conversation on this challenging and important topic. So first, Cecilie, when you look at the ethnic and religious minorities in Afghanistan today, are there any groups that are particularly vulnerable?
Now, Afghanistan is a country that consists of various ethnic and religious minorities, and several of them are at risk. But when we talk about exposure these days, we particularly think about the Hasaras, which is the third largest ethnic group of Afghanistan. It has a Persian language and a Persian link, and they are also a religious minority, the majority of religion of Afghanistan being Sunni Islam, and they are Shia Muslims. And they are then up against the Taliban movement. Now, we know the Taliban as a religious Sunni movement with a Deobandi interpretation of Islam, but the Taliban also represent and come from the Pashtun ethnic group in Afghanistan, which is the largest ethnic group. So the incoming government, the current regime of Afghanistan, consists of a majority ethnic group and a majority religious group, and the Hasaras are a minority ethnic and religious group. And we know from a number of other experiences in recent years that these groups that have both ethnic and religious minority status are at a particular vulnerable state in such transitional periods. But we have Arne with us, and you are both a scholar and practitioner with an impressive experience from Afghanistan dating back to prior to the former reign of the Taliban in the 1990s. Now, would you care to explain to us a little bit about the history of the Hazaras and how they have been exposed to persecution in the modern history of Afghanistan?
I think we start with the fact that Hasaras could be kept as slaves by all other groups in Afghanistan until there was a change in the 1930 constitution. But I would say that a lot of the groups still look upon them, because of their Shia association, as someone that is not as equal to the other groups. And this has really been played out for a number of years on both their ability to gain positions within the government. They're living in the most harsh parts of Afghanistan within the Hindu Kush. They need to be able to venture out to actually have income. A lot of them have done job migration to Pakistan and to, not least, Iran. But they're also then being subject to very strong both massacres and persecutions during the war on the Soviet Union. Later on, we have the more recent examples while Taliban was in control and massacred them in the north of Afghanistan together with Iranian diplomats. But I myself witnessed as how the Tajiks and the Pashtun jointly massacred them in the Afshar district in Kabul in 1993 when I was working there. So there is hardly any group in Afghanistan that somehow have not had their go at the Hazaras. And just to add, because I was also looking into statistics, although they somehow gained more prominence in the recent governments in Afghanistan, they had hardly any position within the army. They really didn't have the influence that could have been expected of a group with such a large part of the population.
That's very interesting. When the Taliban met with the Americans for negotiations in Doha last year, the position of minorities was an important and difficult point of negotiation. Now, during the previous reign of the Taliban in the 1990s, the Hazaras were deemed to be heretics, so they were not acknowledged as proper Muslims. And the Taliban in Doha refused to accept Shia Muslim jurisprudence, the kind of religious practice of the Hazaras, into the future kind of constitutional framework. Now, how do you view the prospects for the Taliban treatment of the Hazaras going forward? What have we seen over the past months?
I think just to add a bit on the totality of things, because I think it was difficult for the Taliban to somehow acknowledge and accept something that would be in competition with their own Sunni, Deobandi thoughts of the state. But what we have seen very clearly is a very close dialogue with including Iran and Taliban, which I assume has also then gone for the protection of the Hazaras. More encouraging, though, is this actual what the Taliban did after they came to Kabul, because already on the first day they went to meet up with the Hazaras in the area where most of the attack has been taking place of them, to say that they were there to protect them, and moreover they took part in the Hazara ceremony, the Muharram, that is sacred for the Hazaras, and by joining there, that was also then a de facto recognition of their faith. So I think that bears a long way to say that at least Taliban at the highest political level have taken this extremely serious.
So then the Taliban is refusing to theoretically acknowledge it, but they are doing things in practice to protect them. Now, one thing is, of course, these challenges that Taliban has with its own ideological foundation, but the Taliban has grown quite substantially, and they now have the responsibility for a number of other groups in Afghanistan. And as you mentioned, persecution of the Hazara is absolutely not something that is only an issue that the Pashtun Taliban have been behind. What are the prospects for the Taliban being able to protect the Hazaras from attacks by other ethnic groups in Afghanistan? What are the challenges of the Taliban going forward?
What has also happened with the Taliban, although the numbers is not that great, but that they have included many more of the other ethnic groups, the Hazaras, Uzbeks, and Tajik within their ranks. So in some of the area, I've seen references to Hazarashat, it's been Hazara commander being in charge of the Taliban. That is in a way also then to accommodate the different groups within the Taliban movement. But we should not forget that the Hazaras has been more subject to a group that is not within the Taliban, but came in from 2014, which is the Islamic State Khorasan group. They are the one who have actually posed largest threat to the Hazaras over the last years.
Yes, you brought up the Islamic State, and they are, of course, on the one hand, rivals to Al-Qaeda and the Taliban, and they also have a modus operandi developed in Iraq and in the Middle East, which specifically targets Shia Muslims. They have a very ferocious anti-Shia doctrine and very often aim at provoking religious sectarian conflict. Now, that brings a new problem in for the Taliban, because it is very difficult for the Taliban to protect anyone from attacks by IS. We saw this at the Kabul airport, which was also an attack by the IS group in Afghanistan. Now, what will be the problems and challenges for the Hazaras and the Taliban kind of preventing this group from destroying the potential security of the Hazaras in Afghanistan?
No, it's a major challenge because the IS might not be that many. I've seen numbers of 2,000, but you don't need more than 1 or 2 or 3 of them to conduct a suicide attack and target the most popular, most vulnerable population. And by that, drawing media attention to it. They thrive on fear, and there are few of them that could instigate fear. So I think this is a major challenge. The only good thing is that this is what the Taliban, the Hazaras, and the US actually have in common, and a concern over the spread of IS. That also then goes to the regional actors. Both Iran and Russia is extremely concerned about it. So there is a conversion of call it fear against the IS that hopefully can be turned into the protection of the Hazaras.
Now, if we look at Iran, which is kind of a kin state for the Hazaras, they have the same ethnic and religious belongings. Iran has operated a militia during the war in Syria consisting of Afghans, mostly Hazara Shia Muslims. Now, there has been some talk over the past year about that militia coming in to protect physically the Hazara population. How do you see the prospects for this, and what type of problems could arise from that?
There has been different numbers. I've seen as high numbers as maybe 50,000 Hasaras that have undergone military training and then also have fought at the different times on behalf of Iran and the neighboring countries. And it comes somehow with two caveats. One is that implies that Hazaras are in a better position to protect themselves about anyone, including the Taliban. But it also then, if the Hazaras should somehow decide to join up with a kind of political opposition towards the Taliban, then they might make themselves more vulnerable. So it's really in a balancing act at the moment where the Hazaras then decide to go, if it's for a political opposition or it's for accommodation and dialogue with the Taliban.
I would like to ask you at the end, Arne, after Western countries have now withdrawn from Afghanistan, what opportunity do we have to monitor the situation of the Hazaras when we have such grave reasons to concern? And not least, what mechanisms do we have, if any, to intervene if the Hazaras are again subjected to massive abuses?
I would say that as compared to last time when the Taliban came into power, we have got something called social media. And the Hazaras has, over these last years, have both been well educated and clearly able to use social media. So very quickly it's possible to pick up if something is happening against them. That said, there is also a lot of rumors out now that can easily be circulated, and fake news is part of this whole war that goes on at the moment. But I think part of the dilemma is that with the withdrawal of a lot of the Western embassies, there are few on the ground actually to pick up the dialogue with the Taliban, which might be required to ensure that there is a follow-up of things. Hopefully there is more of a dialogue between Iran and Taliban than with the US and Taliban at the moment. And this could actually be then very important to ensure that the Taliban is respecting the rights of both the Hazaras but also other ethnic minorities.
Thank you, Arne, and also thank you, Cecilie, for enlightening us and giving us this insight into the very challenging situation in Afghanistan at the moment, not least for the Hazara minority. Thank you very much.